Hey everyone, and welcome back to the desk of Ana Paulina Luna. We have a ton to unpack this week, starting with Joe Biden labeling all of MAGA Republicans as extremists and then backtracking. What's really happening at our southern border, of course, addressing what really happened with the PACT Act, and then going into our Florida Man / viral videos of the week. This is from the desk of Ana Paulina Luna. My name's Ana Paulina Luna. I'm pro-life, pro-God, pro-gun, and anti-globalist. So getting right into it, Joe Biden made a fatal calculation with his dark Democrat address to the nation, starting by labeling all Trump Republicans as MAGA extremists. All right, so first of all, I just want to say from a media perspective, the fact that he went with black and red, I felt like I was watching some terrible rendition of Star Wars where the dark Sith Lord is sitting there talking about how he's going to take out the resistance. That is how this video feels. Check it out.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Okay, so he starts out by saying that, but then check out how less than 24 hours after he said that, probably because of largely due to his team saying, look, Joe, this isn't great for your poll numbers. You're already underwater nationally. And of course, this made a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. He has this to say.
Mr. President, do you consider all Trump supporters to be a threat to the country?
I don't consider any Trump supporter to be a threat to the country.
Weird, right? So less than 24 hours, he does a complete 180, tries to backtrack, but it's already too late. And this is a common occurrence that we see out of the Biden administration. There has to be someone else pulling strings. So let me get this straight. He went out on the national stage and said that half of America, remember the half of America that ended up voting for President Trump, were extremists because what? We want a strong military, because of the fact that we believe that people should be empowered over government, because of the fact that we want real representation in Washington, D.C., not just some beltway representative that's going to vote in or a president that will vote for a special interest and not the American people. Or wait, we want a president that holds China accountable. I mean, these are all pretty common sense approaches to what the America First movement means and what Trumpism is. And yet you have him going on stage with a very dark message, a very divisive message. Remember, he was the one that said that he was going to unite the country. It's been nothing but negative messaging, pointing fingers, a failing economy, and frankly, making people feel very uncomfortable and that they are going to be politically targeted because of the fact that they are either Trump Republicans and or Republicans as a whole. Very, very bad optics. And I can tell you from a media perspective, I would have never done that. I think that whoever did that speech should be fired. Although the American people genuinely understand that whatever Joe Biden says, you just don't believe it because he has no follow through. I think historically he's been known for making stuff up. Didn't he lie about marching in the civil rights movement? Yes, he lied about marching in the civil rights movement. It's either you did or you didn't, but you can't just make that up, of course, with Joe Biden, just like most of the things that he says, he's made it up.
I come out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else.
The one thing that Joe Biden is, again, in his administration is exaggerating on is how they've helped with illegal crossings. We know that under the Biden administration, please see the graphic right next to me, that they have largely been responsible for an increase of over 1.4 million illegal crossings, which is the highest amount in over 2 decades. And here's what the White House press secretary had to say.
Life expectancies are going down at a rate not seen in a century, and part of that is being driven by drug overdoses. So what is the president going to do?
And we agree. We see those same numbers as well. But the fact that we are securing the border, the fact that we are securing record levels of funding from DHS so they can stop illicit drugs from entering into the country, the fact that it's not just drug traffickers that we're dealing with as well, we're stopping financiers. This is what's happening with this under this administration.
It's not being stopped. 300 overdoses. This is being designed to target children, drug cartels, in Mexico want to kill American kids. What is this president doing about it?
I hear you. I just laid out 200% of increase of drug fentanyl seizures. That is a dangerous drug that we are taking off the street.
Okay, I want to bring something up. She says that she's pointing out that there's a 200% increase in seizures after, remember, Biden and Harris campaigned on an open border platform, and they are largely responsible for the amount of increase in illegal immigration because guess what? They were campaigning saying that they wanted all illegals to come here, that they were going to be giving them benefits, this, that, and the other. I mean, literally everything under the sun, catering to that platform, saying that they didn't want to deport people, that was not humanitarian. And yet they created this crisis and then want to come in and say that they're the saviors for it. If we would have had a zero tolerance stance to illegal immigration in the first place, this would never be a problem. One of the biggest problems, though, that we have is that the media has been complicit. The large establishment corporations have been pandering, using the Democrat machine to basically put out wrong information to the American people. Remember, back in 2016 and even in 2020, they largely said that if you wanted border security, that you were what? Racist and xenophobic. So you now have this administration that's saying, oh, we have border security, we want this, that, and the other. Yet they were the ones that were labeling anyone who had a border security stance as these awful things. So this is what they do. It's like 1984, George Orwell, this doublespeak, and yet they are lying to the American people about what's really happening. What I love about what Ducey said, though, and what he points out, and this is something that I'm actually concerned about, especially right now that we're approaching the holiday seasons. We know that Halloween is obviously one of the biggest national holidays here in the United States. Of course, they pass out candy. What these people are doing, what these awful, evil cartel people are doing, is they're lacing these drugs and they're making them look like candy. And then obviously the fentanyl is being pushed through the border, and it's absolutely right to target children, whether they're using them at raves, whether they're passing them out. The fact is that this is something, I mean, even just the point, like, let's see if I have a pen here. Hold on. I want to show this to you. The tip of this pen, okay, just that one little point is enough to kill you. And the fact is they're pushing this in massive amounts. Remember, do you guys remember President Trump was actually saying that fentanyl was largely being manufactured in China, that they were bringing it to South America or to Mexico and then running it into the United States? I think that still holds true. But the fact is that the more that we talk about these issues, the more that the administration actually suppresses that, because they did mess up. It's evident in the numbers that we're seeing with the rise. Many members of border security, law enforcement communities have said this is a problem. Even Mayorkas, okay, was caught on a private recording or caught on a hot mic saying that it was an issue. And yet they won't acknowledge that, just like they won't acknowledge the American people that we are potentially in a recession, that we have a record high number of inflation over the last, 40 years, and that they are responsible for that. So remember, people that you elect in office, if they're not good and they're not fiscally conservative, you will see this massive increase in spending, and that massive increase in spending leads to debt, which leads to inflation, which you cannot fix with more spending and or bailouts. And so this is something that we will increasingly see as an ongoing issue. I think that if Congress really wants to do something, we have to balance the budget. I know that's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But I mean, we saw it happen in the PACT Act, where you actually had Democrats that, again, had their pet projects, and they used veterans, okay, for them to get an additional $400 billion in spending. They used it for the PACT Act, but guess what? It does not go to veterans. So let me say that again. The $400 billion in the PACT Act does not go to veterans. So there's a portion of it that does, and then there's a portion of it that goes into actually something called mandatory spending. So I want to explain that and break that down for you. This stat came from a website, clubforgrowthfoundation.org. So let's really look at what happened with the PACT Act, right? There's two types of spending. There's discretionary and mandatory. And what the PACT Act did is it took that $400 billion and made it mandatory spending. So discretionary spending, according to clubforgrowthfoundation.org, is discretionary spending is subject to speeding limits put in place by Congress to try to control the spending addiction of many in Congress who would otherwise spend our nation further into bankruptcy, while mandatory spending is not subject to such limits. So basically what they did is they took something that's actually really important to many veterans, to include myself, to include my husband, to include our friends who are actually exposed to these burn pits. They said that this was supposed to go to vets, and it doesn't go to vets. And this is something that Senator Toomey, rightfully so, called out and addressed, that they will use these really important causes and then basically play a shell game with the spending.
We are witnessing a very old Washington trick playing out on what might be an unprecedented scale. And what is that trick? That trick is you take a very sympathetic group of Americans. It could be children with rare diseases. It could be victims of crime. It could be veterans who are suffering an illness after having been exposed to toxic chemicals while serving our country. You take this sympathetic group, craft legislation to address their problems, and then sneak in something that's completely unrelated, that could never pass on its own, and dare anyone to stand up and say a word about that, because we all know if you raise the concern about the unrelated provision, people in this chamber and outside will stand up and make up all kinds of fabrications and falsehoods. They will enlist some pseudo-celebrities. They will get their accomplices in the media to propagate the dishonest charge that, oh, those mean Republicans don't care about those sympathetic victims.
So it's frankly really disgusting that this is what Washington, D.C. has really become. If you were to have something like a GoFundMe page, right? And you were supposed to say, okay, this is going to go to one cause, and then it goes to something else. What do they call that? That's called fraud. And yet they're able to do it at the national level because people are too afraid to stand up and say, hey, this is not right. If you want to give $400 billion to vets, guess what? All $400 billion should go to veterans. It should not go to anything else but that. But the fact is that when you have people up there that don't have skin in the game, that frankly don't understand what it's like to have their family members and their service members exposed to these things, they're not going to fight as hard as someone who's experienced it personally. Frankly, it's disgusting that this is going to other projects, to other things other than veterans. It should only be going to veterans. I rest my case on that. And I think most people, after they realize, hey, guess what? PACT Act didn't actually go fully to veteran funding, I think that they would agree. Basically, rule is if you have a bill, this should be common sense. It should go to what the bill says it's going to go to. It should not go to anything else but that one cause. Frankly, I'm so sick and tired of having these bills pushed through. They say it's for one thing, it's for the other. It's like we are in an abusive relationship with the federal government and they need to stop. Just be honest, just be open about what it's for. And guess what? If we don't have the money to spend, we shouldn't be spending it, especially on these pet projects. All of this extra pork in these bills, that's a problem that we have. And frankly, a lot of these representatives, they're not going to be paying. It's going to be us. It's going to be the future generation that's paying for it. And it is concerning. It's absolutely alarming and concerning. So obviously, we want veterans to get the best health care possible. We want veterans to get benefits. But what we don't want is veterans being used by politicians to get more funding for things that don't even go to them. Getting into kind of a more or less comical story, we have an increase in Americans because of course, the increased spending leading to inflation that we have in this country are now fleeing the United States to Mexico City, and Mexicans don't like it.
This is what some Mexicans are calling modern colonialism. The heavy influx of Americans moving to Mexico City to take advantage of lower living costs.
Mexico is
Other
beautiful,
locals
by the way.
are calling it gentrification, a plague, or even an invasion.
Wait!
Behind you!
Oh my God!
You're thinking of moving to Mexico City? Wow, one simple recommendation. .com. Gentrification is the name of the game.
Critics say the flood of Americans has caused an increase in the cost of basic necessities for locals. Rent has more than doubled for some. This is not to mention that Mexico City residents already spend an average of 60% of their income on housing.
The same people moving are the same ones who complain when immigrants come to America.
I don't know that.
Natives are upset, as they should be.
Many Americans moving to Mexico City are working remotely and still getting paid in US dollars. Some locals have benefited from increasing tourism, but for many, that doesn't balance out rising costs and inflation. Mexicans are also fed up with Americans ignoring cultural and social norms. And some complain that in certain places, English is more common than Spanish. Local businesses are being forced to shut down and replaced by cafes and Pilates studios.
People who live in Mexico City and people who work in Mexico City, including myself, we want to get a place, but it's really difficult because the prices are so high, and even with a good salary, it's very difficult. You're still bragging about how cheap it is and how it's not even like a quarter of your rent in LA, and it's messed up, right?
I mean, here's the thing. So free market capitalism, obviously we're a fan of that, but check this out. So a lot of Americans going down to Mexico City, yes, they have the protections of the fact that they are Americans. But the fact is that Mexico actually this past election cycle had one of the bloodiest elections ever recorded. And I think that we can actually get some clips here that will show you just on headlines about what was really happening down there. You know, the government of Mexico has seriously battled for a number of years with the cartels and all of these tourist spots, Mexico City, Tulum, all of them. If you go a little bit outside of them, I mean, you're talking about a pretty dangerous territory. So the fact is that obviously we're seeing Americans that have the privilege, all right? A lot of people that are working your average 9-to-5 jobs or that are working minimum wage don't have the privilege of leaving the country to go work remotely from their phones because they don't like what's happening to the inflation costs and what's happening with our economy. Yet these are the same people largely that voted for this terrible policy by backing someone like Joe Biden, and were largely these same people that were saying that the Republican agenda was racist and xenophobic, all this nastiness. It's just, I find it ironic because there are a lot of people that are in Mexico that come to the United States, a lot of seasonal workers that are pursuing the American way of life. And yet I find that this interview is actually very left-leaning because a majority of people that are working in the service industry or that are working to basically provide for their families are not going to complain about people actually going there. So the fact that they're calling it colonialism, I mean, like, I'm so tired of that word. You know, someone like myself, and I'll just give you a really real perspective here. So I'm half white and I'm half Hispanic. And so I've had people a lot of the times just like post all over my stuff, colonizer, colonizer, colonizer. Okay, first of all, I was never a colonizer and you were never colonized. And so the fact that these people resort back to that, I mean, it is literally just the most small-minded mindset. If you want people to actually help your economy, and frankly, I wish Mexico had a stronger tourist economy because I think that it would actually take away a lot of the control of those bad people, to include the cartels that are actually exploiting and basically running a very, very bloody government. And frankly, people wouldn't have to come here if Mexico had a more stable economy. So I think that there's multiple ways to look at this, but it is comical that they're saying that people that are going there, paying the rent, paying apparently over what they're asking, stimulating the economy, are actually being called colonizers. So maybe if those people see what really happens in a country that does have corrupt governments, does have basically a tiered standard of living from people that can't basically exercise free market capitalism because there are literally cartels telling them what to do with their dollars and they're being blackmailed if they don't actually, bend the knee to them. I think that maybe they might have a little bit more of an appreciation for what the United States is and, take this whole woke agenda and throw it out the window. So interesting perspective from the people of Mexico. However, I will say this, the United States is still the greatest country in the world. And I guarantee people that go over there, they're going to come on back, especially if they're starting to see this anti-American sentiment rise in Mexico. I will say, though, I don't see this coming out of the government of Mexico anytime soon because, frankly, they know that the United States and them, they actually have a very good working relationship if you have someone like President Trump or someone who understands about trade and policy. And frankly, I think they're one of our biggest trade allies along with Canada. Going back into my favorite section now, and I wanted to change it up a little bit and more or less address it as our Florida Man / viral videos of the week, because I realize some of the Florida Man stories can be very negative. We want to keep it happy here, and there's so much negative going on with everything happening in the country right now. We wanted to give you guys a laugh. So keeping it centric to what's happening with our oceans, we actually had a crab video that went viral. So this guy, I mean, I'm not going to explain it. You just watch it.
Little guy.
This poor crab.
Ow! Jesus! Fuck!
Okay, so obviously we can't blame the crab in this instance. He was literally being boiled alive But on his way out, he had one thing to say about it, and he obviously pinched the guy. So it was pretty funny. That was posted, I forgot on the page. Oh, I think it was posted on, I can't even say it because it's a bad word, but F word Jerry on Instagram. They're actually really funny, like meme blog. And then you have this one, which was my personal favorite.
You gotta quit that shit.
Andy, how many times do I scare you a week? Not anymore. So I used to scare Andy. You want to tell him real quick what happened the last time I tried to scare you?
I get scared, I get angry.
Yeah, Andy's bad to scare. Some people, though, fight or flight response. In this instance, he clearly had the flight response and screams. That's why I said fight or flight. But in this instance, he had the flight response, which is a little bit weird coming from a husband, but either way, great video. Going back into our chicken update. So as you guys know, I think on one of the second or third episodes, I explained to you about what was happening with my little chicken homesteading here in Florida. And of course, as our chicks got bigger and now they're able to fly every single night, they've been perching basically out front of our house, and they figured out, I kid you not, chickens are actually smart. They figured out that at the same time every night, if they peck on the Ring app, that it'll actually get me to go outside. So we wanted to share this video with you guys. This is Nugget. And she had actually, and I have plenty of these videos, but she figured out how to activate the Ring app. And so here we go, Nugget. We have Nugget and Creamsicle over here waking us up and telling us that they want to go to bed. That's all we have for you guys this week. Hope you guys tune in next week to From the Desk of Ana Paulina Luna. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share our videos. We also take questions from all of you. So if you guys ever see a Florida man in action, tag us. If you have questions, add us. We'll be here for it. And I'll catch you guys next week on From the Desk of Ana Paulina Luna.